So two cells involved in bone remodeling are what? Osteoclast and what? The osteoblast. Okay, in your matrix, guys, you're going to have minerals. You have the hydroxyapatite crystals. The majority of the matrix consists of those hydroxyapatite crystals, which are actually, I think they have, there are other components or such as glycoproteins that's found in the matrix as well, but hydroxyapatite, which is what, 85% of it is where? In your bones. It's just a combination of calcium and what? Phosphate. Calcium, of course, is the leading forerunner. 99% of our bones is made up of calcium, not 10%. And then, of course, the second most common, of course, is going to be phosphate or phosphorus. Okay? That 89% hydroxyapatite is what makes the bones very, very hard. And, of course, it makes them, but they can't bend a whole lot. But the collagen is what allows the bones to kind of twist and bend a little bit. Okay, now rickets, I asked you guys about earlier. When you have a deficiency of those calcium salts, which of course is hydroxyapatite, rickets is common in third world countries because they don't have a lot of the nutrients. They don't consume vitamin D, which is a milk. Vitamin D, of course, which is found in milk, is another reason kids get rickets. The bones are so soft and pliable that the weight of the body, of course, we know the stress is going to be put where? On the femur, and it's going to go down to your tibia and your fibula. However, that stress, because those bones are so weak and the weight of the body is having an impact on them, they tend to have those bowed legs because the legs are starting to what? To bend, because they don't have the calcium salts nor the vitamin D. Vitamin D, rickets is not common, very common over here because we have what? Vitamin D, of course, is put in our milk. We can consume a lot of calcium in like green leafy vegetables. Also, you can take a calcium supplement. So between the ages of like 25 and 40, that's when your bones starts becoming deficient in a lot of the minerals, which can lead to osteoporosis, things of that sort. Osteogenesis imperfecta, of course, is brittle bone disease. Excessively brittle bones due to lack of what? Protein, collagen. Collagen, we know, is the composite or the composition that gives the bone is what? Strength, right? Makes it very, very durable, very, very hard, and it actually what? Strengthens the bone. I think I remember, I don't know, it may have been another class, the corkscrew fashion that you see on page 212 of that collagen. They pulled it out for you. Kind of looks like plywood. That's what gives the bone that tensile, really makes it really, really strong. All right. However, someone with osteogenesis imperfecta is typically congenital. They're born with it. These people are prone to having a lot of fractures. I had a student maybe a little bit over a year ago. She was born with it. And of course, as a kid, she didn't spend a lot of time outside playing because she says it was not, she was always at the orthopedic doctor because she had fractures all the time, especially during what? Bone development. Okay. She don't have them as much now. She's older, sort of grown out of it, but she still gets them because she was born with the disease osteogenesis imperfecta, which is somewhere in your textbook. I have no idea. Yeah, on page 211. Yeah, they kind of have it italicized. Excessively brittle as a brittle bone what? Disease. It's also called Paget's disease. So on table 7.2 at the end of the chapter, they have all of the bone diseases listed for you. Without collagen, a jogger's bone would shatter under what? The impact of what? Running. So now you see the importance of what? Having what? Collagen as well as what? The hydroxyapatite crystals. Perforating in Volkmann's canal or your central canal. Now here, okay, here's that collagen corkscrewing around. They're alternating right, left, right, left. Here you have your arteries, veins, nerves and bone as well. So they're showing you what the central canal looks like. This is the central canal here. Okay, it looks like a little tunnel. However, bisecting the central canal, you have your perforating canal or your Volkmann's canal. Any nutrients that has to get to the osteocytes, which are trapped inside of the lacunae, which is right here, these little dark spots that you see. Osteocytes are mature osteoblasts. However, they're trapped here, but nutrients have to come by way of the perforating or the Volkmann's canal to the central canal in order to feed them. Any type of waste that has to be removed is going to come by way of the central canal as well as the Volkmann's canal as well. All right. That's all I need to say about that. Anyway, spongy bone. The thing about spongy bone, like I said, it has a sponge-like appearance. Now it is calcified, which means spongy bone is very, very hard. In your, this is your femur. At the distal end of the femur, which is your epiphysis, you have spongy bone. So you have slivers of bone, the little spicles, those little plates are called trabeculae, and you have those spaces because of the spicles, the trabeculae, because the red bone marrow has to be housed there as well. So you need space for your red bone marrow. Also, the spongy bone makes the bone very, very lightweight. Okay, it's not really, really heavy. Although hard, it's very, very lightweight. There's no central canal here, so the osteocytes are close to the red bone marrow. That's how the nutrients are provided to them. And of course, we talked about stress lines earlier. Now, I think I remember telling you, in your textbook, the body weight or any type of stress is going to be placed, is going to make contact with this bone right here. This is your weight-bearing bone. Okay, this is that big old hip bone that goes right here. Okay, that can go up here. So your hip bone, the medial side, okay, most of the stress is going to be placed on, at this point here, more medial, okay. So in your textbook, I don't know what page it's on. I don't know, you guys can look at it. They have those red and purple stress lines that are actually forming. However, on the medial aspect of this bone, you're going to have a lot of compression going on here, okay. So because of the hydroxyapatite crystals, because of the collagen, which is your your polymer or your protein, this bone is very, very difficult to break or shatter if you jog, all right, because the stress is here, the compression, most of the strength is going to be over here on the medial aspect of it. The only way this bone will actually fracture or break is if someone comes to you from the lateral side, like a really, really hard football tackle. It's going to cause this bone to break or or fracture. Also, if you have osteoporosis, they're more prone to having hip fractures. So the fractures right here typically occurs between the greater and the lesser trochanter, right through here, with someone that has osteoporosis. So they get a lot of hip fractures. So like I said, it's very, very difficult. So the stress lines are on page, page 213. Yep, 213. Figure 7.5. So it's right here where the stress, where you see those stress lines, that's where the bone is thickest, okay, to support any changes or the weight of the body. But keep in mind, or just remember that collagen hydroxyapatite crystal is what actually protects this bone from being fractured so easily. So it kind of looks like little cottage or Swiss cheese. Another thing that's going to make this bone very, very strong, of course, is the spongy bone. The spongy bone kind of acts like the internal framework for the compact bone. So if you've got loss of spongy bone, of course, which is surrounded by compact bone, you're more prone to getting fractures as well. At the end of the chapter, they show this lady with osteoporosis. Page 228, figure 7.20, they're showing you the spine of that lady with osteoporosis. So they're actually showing you what normal spongy bone looks like and what an abnormal spongy bone looks like in that lady's spine. Okay, so it looks like something has just eaten a hole in the spongy bone of her spine, you know. So once that spongy bone is gone, that's what happens. They're more prone to what? Fractures. So in her spine or the backbone, of course, that spongy bone, of course, is starting to what? Deteriorate. And as you can see, that's what causes the widow's hump or the curving of what? The shoulders in elderly people because of the loss of what? Spongy bone. Okay? So if you look at letter B, you can actually see how the vertebrae are kind of sort of becoming what? A little bit compressed. So when the vertebrae become compressed, so it's really the thoracic vertebrae that causes that little widow's hump, okay, or the curving of what? The shoulders. So spongy bone, very, very important. Spongy bone, of course, is replenished several times a year. Compact bone, it probably will take 10 years for that bone. That's a part of that bone remodeling what? Process in Anatomy 201. Wanted to bring that to your attention. So Wolff's Law, we're going to talk about him a little bit later as well. So here are your stress lines here. Bone marrow, here they're showing you, if you look at the axial skeleton here of this individual, well, that individual, you have what? Your skull, your trunk, and of course your hip bones. You're going to have what? The red bone, what? Marrow. That's why it's red in the center. Now the appendicular skeleton, which is your appendages, your arms and your legs. Now here, the heads of the humerus, and that the humerus, which is here, and the heads of what? The femur, you're going to have what? Red bone, what? Marrow. However, in the shaft or your diaphysis, what type of bone marrow are you going to have? Yellow bone marrow, which is just what? Fat, or what? Adipose what? Tissue. Okay? So the soft tissue that occupies the marrow cavity of a long bone and small spaces amid the trabeculae of what? Spongy bone. So red marrow, another term for it, hemopoietic tissue or hemopoiesis, is just the production of blood cells. All of your blood cells, actually, both your red and your white blood cells. The red marrow, it just shows you the representative locations, which we talked about over here, where you're going to actually find it in adults. However, red marrow will convert itself to yellow marrow, which is just like a fat, and then the bone will serve as like a fat reservoir for the yellow marrow, okay? And all it is just adipose tissue. However, it can convert back to the red bone marrow or red marrow in emergency situations, but it just won't go back on its own. So it no longer produces what? Blood. So red marrow, of course, is more common in kids and children, but as you start aging, the red becomes what? Just fatty what? Tissue or fat. Okay, ossification or osteogenesis, of course, is another term for the formation of bone. There are two ways in which bone form, but of course I only talk about one of them, and this is endochondral ossification, because most of our bones will actually form by endochondral ossification. Your clavicle, your skull, of course, will form by intramembranous ossification, so I really don't talk about that. It's pretty much the same concept. If you read the 4 steps on intramembranous, which is on page 214, as opposed to endochondral ossification, which of course is on pages 214, 215, and what? 216. You got it? Okay. So what is the forerunner to bone? That may be a test question. The forerunner to bone formation. Does that question make sense? Probably not, huh? I think I remember it from the PowerPoint. The forerunner to the bone is blank. Before your bones become bones, what is it? Cartilage. Figure 7.10 is showing you the fetal skeleton at 12 weeks of age on page 216. So the precursor to bone, of course, guys, is cartilage. Remember that. Now, during 6 weeks prior to that, the developing fetus is, of course, the entire network or framework is just what? Cartilage. Can you imagine that? Then around 6 weeks of development, bone formation kicks in. This is it right here. Here, there are two terms you probably should know as well, appositional growth and interstitial growth over here. Now, what we have here, they've taken the metacarpal bone out of that baby's kid's finger, okay? Now, all you have here is just what? It's cartilage, right? Remember, bone does not start forming until around, what, 6 weeks. Now, you got to have, what does perichondrium mean? It's outside around cartilage, right? Now, they're going to change the name down here to periosteum. What does that mean? It's a round bone, right? So as it starts converting to bone, the name is going to change from perichondrium to what? Periosteum. So around your hyaline cartilage, you have what? Your perichondrium. This is the early cartilage model. Right here in the center, which is your primary ossification center, that's going to over here become your primary marrow cavity. Look at the chondrocytes. What are chondrocytes? No. Osteocytes are bone cells. Yeah, they're cartilage what? Cells. So what happens is these chondrocytes, as you can see, they're getting bigger, they're going to enlarge, and what's going to happen is they're going to eventually what? Die, because they're cut off or cut away from what? The nutrient supply. And then as you can see, because your osteoblasts are actually coming in and there's laying down the framework for bone formation to actually come. Now you have this little bony collar here that's forming, as you can see, your compact bone is forming right here on the surface. It's called bone of collar or bony collar, just depends on the textbook that you're using. So once these die, your osteoblasts, of course, are going to come in right here and it's going to start laying down what? Your spongy bone. Now, you can see that the cartilage is finally what? Disappearing or eroding, because your osteoclast actually will come in and start removing the remnants of what? That cartilage. You're going to have your blood supply that's going to move in as well, which is your vascular what? Invasion. Now, here the primary ossification center is now called your primary what? Marrow what? Cavity. Then once this is complete, okay, your secondary ossification center has to what? Form into what? Bone. Typically, what's going to happen here, it just depends on the individual. It depends on the age of the person or the kid, okay? These right here don't form at the same time, the proximal and your distal end secondary ossification center, because you have one here, you've got what? One down here. One is typically going to lag behind, so when the baby is born, bone formation probably on one end of this little metacarpal bone is still what? Forming. So don't pop their fingers, okay? So here you've got your primary, your secondary ossification center here that's forming, that's going to what? Lead to the formation of your secondary what? Marrow cavity. You've got your vascular invasion going on here in the epiphysis. Now here, metaphysis or your metaphysis. Now look at this part right here. Now your diaphysis is fine now. There's no more what? Cartilage. still got cartilage here. You still got cartilage where? Up here, right? But it's slowly what? Deteriorating or what? Going away. Bone at birth with enlarged primary marrow cavity and the appearance of your secondary marrow cavity in one of what? The epiphyses, proximal or distal. It could be either or. I don't know. It just depends on what? The individual. So on page metaphysis, which is on page, let me show you something. 2, 3, we're on number what? 4. Primary marrow cavity, number 4. On page 2, what? 216. What am I looking for? Oh yeah, bone elongation, page 217. Okay. If you look at figure, if you read 5 metaphysis, the transitional zone facing the marrow what cavity is metaphysis. In figure 7.9, step what? 4. That's where you see it, right? Okay. The cartilage is the blue region in each metaphysis, or metaphysis is what? Violet. So if you look, they show you the steps as to what happens to convert the cartilage to bone. Between zones 1 and 2, that's where you're going to have the most growth. Okay. Zone of cell proliferation. That's when the cells, the chondrocytes are going to multiply, they enlarge, they rearrange themselves. Hypertrophy, of course, you're going to have what? An enlargement of what? Those particular what? Cells as well. So that's the metaphysis component of it, where you're going to actually have a little bit of cartilage there, but not a whole lot. And like I said, it's a transitional phase between what? The marrow what? Cavity. Wanted to just bring that out. But you can actually still see it here in step number what? 5. You can actually see it here as well. But look at the cartilage here. Now, we have an epiphyseal plate that has actually what? Formed here on that end, but you don't have it here. What is an epiphyseal plate? Bone of child with epiphyseal plate at the distal end. What's an epiphyseal plate? Oh, But you still got cartilage in there. You still got cartilage right here. That's your growth zone. Exactly. That's your what? Your growth zone. Growth zone is where? The long bones, right? Name some of your long bones. Give me a name, Mary. Mary, I need one from you. Wake up. Which one is this one? Which bone is this? What's your name? April. What? Brittany. Which one is this one? Uh-oh. We got a problem here. You can't. I'm locking that lab up today. You can't leave until you tell me. Which one is this one? The what? The radius, right? Fibula. The carpals, right, in your wrist, right? Name the 8 carpal bones. Give me one. I'm going down the row. Name a carpal bone. Because today, before you leave, you're going to have to name all of them. So don't get in lab and I'll be in there today. The anatomy police will be on guard today in lab, okay? I won't be in the office, that's for sure. Brielle, name a carpal bone. The Okay. Next person. Pisiform. Good. Next. It's your turn. The trapezoid. It's your turn. Scaphoid. Mary. Hamate. Looks like a hammer. Next. I think there's one left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Huh? Iobia? Triquetrum? Good. That's what you were trying to say, triquetrum? What's the other T? Ashley Guyton? It's found right here, just above the thumb. Next person on the row. Next person, Joey Jones. Trapezium. Very good. Are you sure it's not the trapezius? What's a trapezius? It's a back muscle, right? The muscle right here. Okay, good. So there's 8 of them. These right here, what are they called? Metacarpals. There's 5 of them. These are long bones too. What are these? Which one is the proximal, your middle, and your distal phalanx? Bend your finger and what? Okay. What is medial in your book? I thought it was middle. Okay. If you put medial, it's wrong. It's middle. Proximal, middle, and what? Let's go. What is this? What's the lay term for clavicle? Somebody said the ischium. Oh my God. You sit on that. Collarbone, right? Where's the acromial end? Is it medial or lateral on me? Lateral, right? Where's the sternal end? This part right here, right? It's connected to the sternum, right? What's the lay term for scapula? Shoulder blade. What part of the humerus fits into this? Very good. The head, right? What part of this little socket right here is called what? The glenoid what? Cavity. Good. What is this called? Some of y'all are ready. Okay, those of you that are ready, when you get in there, if you just want to be in there for 15 minutes because you know all of your parts, that's fine. Just let me know. Say I'm ready. Okay, fine. Some of y'all are going to be in there for 2 hours with the police. So, back to this right here for now. So yeah, if you look, your epiphyseal plate, guys, is called your growth plate or your growth zone. So if you look at number 6, the metaphysis has actually disappeared, and you're going to see the epiphyseal plate. Once all of the cartilage has been depleted from it, it's going to leave behind an epiphyseal line. So when you have your epiphyseal line, guys, that means you have stopped growing, okay? Your long bones have stopped what? Growing. And it's typically between late teens and what? Early 20s. The only thing that's going to be left behind is your what? Articular what? Cartilage at the distal ends, as you can see, of the of an adult bone, okay? So it's like the epiphysis and your diaphysis are going to kind of unite or fuse together, forming pretty much one area, but you're going to have the epiphyseal line. Um, let's get ready. So why is this articular cartilage left behind? Because that's the only thing that's left behind. We started off with the entire bone being what? Cartilage. Right. It reduces what? Friction between what? The bones. So you have synovial fluid. We know what synovial fluid is, right? Your synovial fluid is actually what feeds the articular what? Cartilage. Okay? So when you have synovial fluid, it's going to feed what? The cartilage, and it reduces what? Friction. So it's kind of like your joints are being oiled by the synovial fluid, but when that cartilage, if you have no cartilage, you're going to have bone spurs that will actually what? Develop. And of course, you're going to have the synovial fluid, of course, is not circulating. And of course, it's going to lead to a form of what? Arthritis. And with the weather changing, some of y'all's knees are probably aching now. You know what I mean? Any type of degenerative changes that occur in your joints is due to the wearing away of the cartilage, the articular cartilage, and the synovial fluid not circulating. It's like the two of those are married. They go what? Hand in hand. All right. Okay, so let's look at the epiphyseal plate, number 5 on page 216. Okay, let's look at number 4. Where it says the secondary marrow cavity, it talks about how one of them is going to lag behind the secondary ossification center. In bones with 2 secondary ossification centers, one center lags behind the other in what? Development. So at birth there is a secondary marrow cavity at one end, while chondrocyte limbs are still cartilaginous at what? At birth. Okay, so there's still going to be cartilage remaining at what? One particular end. Number 5. Someone read number 5. Can everybody read at one time? Yeah. Yeah, so your bones grow in length. Typically what? Your long bones. Okay. Mary, read number 6.
By the late teens to early 20s, all the main cartilage in the epiphyseal plate is generally crystalline, and the gap between the epiphysis and the epiphysis closes. The primary and secondary narrow cavities then unite into a single cavity, and the bone can no longer grow in the middle.
Absolutely. It leaves behind what? A line. That's when you stop growing. Unless you're on steroids. If you're on steroids, which a lot of these kids are, you know, they start playing these contact sports in the first grade. Look, kids are athletes in the first grade now. But if they're taking any type of anabolic steroids while the bones are growing, it's going to stunt the growth, and they're going to be short at 21. Okay? So as long as anything that will stunt the growth of those bones, as long as those bones are growing, do not take steroids. It talks about it in your textbook. Also, if you fracture, remember these kids are playing these sports in first grade now. All right. Orthopedic doctors are really concerned about that too, because they're seeing that these kids are starting these sports so early now, and they're starting to see a lot of fractures while the bone is still developing and growing. And if it's not treated properly, you have one long leg and one short leg. But the issue that they're having is because, you know, those kids are still developing. The bones, the brain, you know, with playing football, they have concussions, and then when they're 20 years later, they jump off a building, okay? There's something going crazy because that brain has been hit a lot. But Yeah, so that's the big thing with doctors now. They're saying these kids are starting these sports early. And a lot of times those fractures over time as they age will turn into what? Arthritis. So these kids are going to be in a lot of pain, 10, probably when they're in their 20s or 30s. Okay? So we just talked about this, right? The epiphyseal plate persists through what? Childhood and adolescence, and it's your growth zone for bone what? Bone elongation. That's what it does. That's that. When does it stop growing? Late teens, what? Early what? 20s. That's when it stopped growing. Okay? Ossification continues. Now we're about to talk about bone remodeling. Bones grow in two directions. It's going to what? Lengthen, and it's going to what? Widen. There are two terms used to describe this. You have interstitial growth in your textbook as well as appositional growth. Ossification continues throughout life with the growth and remodeling of what? Of bones. Okay. Minerals, of course, old minerals have to be depleted. New minerals have to go in. The shape of the bone is going to change as you put what? Stress on it. The architecture of the bone, of course, can actually what? Change. All of that is what? Bone remodeling. You getting braces put on your teeth, of course, is what? Bone remodeling, okay? You getting a tooth yanked out of your mouth, okay? And then all of a sudden that little hole closes up, of course, and is an example of bone remodeling. So it occurs where? Throughout life. So bone growth and remodeling, okay. On page, so it talks about bone elongation on page 217. We must return to the epiphyseal plates mentioned earlier. See figure 7.9. Did we look at figure 7.9? Yeah. Okay. And they're actually showing you the epiphyseal plate. Figure 711, the x-ray of a child's what? Hand. So it's like there's a little gap that you see. You see the little plate, and then all of a sudden it's like those bones are going to fuse together, creating what? A line. Okay. Interstitial growth, page 218. How does a child grow in height? Okay, so we've mentioned this one right here, a region of transition from cartilage to bone. That's your growth zone. Okay. So interstitial growth, guys, that's when the bones elongate. They're going to increase in what? Length. Okay. What causes that? The epiphyseal what? Plate, right? Appositional growth, on the other hand, is when new bone, of course, is going to be laid down on the surface, and it's going to create what? The widening of the bone. Bones increase in width throughout what? Life. So you've got two terms. One is going to cause the bones to elongate. The other one is going to cause the bones to what? To widen, or the width of it to what? To actually take shape. Okay, interstitial growth. Page 218, second paragraph. Bone elongation is really a result of what? Cartilage what? Growth. Cartilage growth from within by the multiplication of chondrocytes and deposition of new matrix in the interior is called what? Interstitial growth. The most common form of dwarfism results from a failure of cartilage growth in what? The long bones. So if you look at figure 7.13, of course I'm sure it probably mentions that. Achondroplastic what? Dwarfism is really, like this is the failure of the cartilage to actually grow in what? The long bones. And you've probably seen dwarfs. If you look at this lady in your textbook, she has her axial skeleton or axial portion of her body is fine. The head, the neck, and what? The torso. But it's her long bones that, well, we know our long bones is what grows anyway. But look at her short arms, her long bones, the cartilage failed to what? To grow. Okay? Look how short her legs are. So and they have those short, nubby what? Fingers, metacarpal bones, because the growth has actually what? Stop. Okay? However, you can have an excessive amount, but so they're comparing her to a normal size adult, but at the same time, you can have pituitary dwarfism. Pituitary dwarfism, you guys are going to probably talk about, well, I know you will, in Anatomy 202, the pituitary gland, which secretes a growth hormone. Oftentimes, if you're not secreting enough of it, some people are just short in nature, okay? They're like this tall. They're not midgets. Well, they don't use that term anymore. They're little people. They're not little people. They're just short, you know. So they didn't produce enough of that hormone. Kids nowadays, I mean, you can get hormone injections if you go to an endocrinologist. If your kid feels like he or she is just way too short, you can get hormone injections. I think it talks about that too. Pituitary dwarfism. Dwarfism is a condition in which the long bones of the limbs stop growing in childhood while the growth of other bones is what? Unaffected. Okay? Pituitary dwarfism, in which there is a deficiency of what? Growth hormone, stunts the growth of all of the bones, and the person has short stature but normal what proportions throughout what? The skeletal what? System. Okay? So the most common form of dwarfism results from failure of cartilage growth in what? The long bones. Okay. You got to know Wolff's Law, which is important. Now, this is what Dr. Wolff stated. Those stress lines that you see on that femur in your textbook, he says, any type of mechanical stress that's going to be placed on the bone, okay, the shape of the bone is going to change. That's his law, okay? Architecture of bone determined by the mechanical stresses placed on it, and bones adapt to with what? Withstand it, okay? So whenever you put stress on a bone, that's bone remodeling. If you exercise, okay, athletes, people that do a lot of manual labor, their bones are really strong, pretty dense, okay? However, someone that's a couch potato that has no intention of lifting a dumbbell or a soup can or walking through the neighborhood, you're in for a treat, because your osteoclasts are going to start outpacing the osteoblasts, and your bones are going to get very, very weak, okay? And your doctor will say, well, you need to take a calcium and vitamin D supplement, okay? So bone remodeling occurs throughout life, 10% per what? Per year. Okay, remember I told you about the spongy bone? It has to be what? Replenished continuously. And it normally does it like on a yearly basis, but not the compact bone. It could take several years before it actually, something happens with it. So why do we have bone remodeling? Microfractures, those little hairline fractures, releases minerals where? Into the blood. Calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, all of that. And it reshapes what? The bones to what? In response to use and what? Disuse. Okay? So, a really good example, which is on your exam, is your greater trochanter, your lesser trochanter. Okay, babies, they crawl, right? Then all of a sudden they get up into that upright position and they start making an attempt to what? To walk. So there's stress on what? This bone now. Because there's stress on this bone, this little outgrowth here, the greater trochanter and the lesser trochanter, their muscles or the tendons are going to start pulling on this bone to create this little bump here that you see. That's stress what? On a bone. Okay? And it's a good thing, because it makes the bones what? Stronger, and then pretty soon they're what? They're running and into what? Everything. So it's a collaborative and precise action of what? your osteoblast and your what? Your osteoclast. So as long as you are exercising, you're putting weight on your bone, your osteoblast is going to start depositing what? More bone and making them what? Stronger. However, if you're not doing anything, your osteoclasts, which are not our friends, they start going in and just eating away or etching their way into the bone. And of course, the bone is going to become very, very brittle over time. Okay? Page 219, first paragraph. In addition to their growth, bones were continually remodeled throughout life by the absorption of old bone and deposition of what? New. This process replaces about 10% of the skeletal tissue per year, repairs, microfractures, blah, blah, blah. Now, this is what Dr. Wolfe states. Okay? Someone read Wolfe's Law of Bone, the second paragraph.
Wolff's Law of Bone states that the architecture of bone is determined by the mechanical stresses placed upon it, and the bone thereby adapts to withstand those stresses. Wolff's Law is a fine example of the complementary of form and function, showing that the form of a bone is shaped by its function and experience. It is admirable, just remarkably demonstrated by figure 7.5. In which we see the trabeculate rangy bone have developed along the lines of stress placed on the femur. Wolfe observed that these stress lines were very similar to the ones that engineers saw in mechanical cranes. The effect of stress on bone development is quite evident in tennis players in whom the bones of the racket arm are more robust than those of the other arm. Long bones of the limbs are deepest at about mid-shaft, because this is where they are subjected to the greatest stress.
Yep. Mid-shaft. Greatest stress. Like midway here. Okay? But the thing about it is, like I said, if you're not using, so he just gave the example of the baby putting stress on the bone. If you don't use these bones, okay, you know, you lose what you what? You don't use. You lose what you don't what? Use. Okay? So, someone like, if you've noticed someone that has been in a cast or a splint or something, that limb may have kind of gotten a little bit what? Smaller. Okay? And they're very weak when they come out of it. However, the moment they start putting stress back on that limb or that leg, it's going to get a little bit more robust. So it just gave you the example of the tennis. If you're right-handed, I mean this arm, if you're right-handed, this arm is typically stronger than what? This one anyway, right? Because you're using what? Using it more. So even with playing tennis, one arm is going to be a little bit more robust than what? Than others. So people that are bedridden are very, very weak, you know, because they're not putting any what? Any stress on their bones. And like I said, they only recommend just doing a moderate amount of activities per day, just a little bit of exercise. And even if you just do a little bit of Zumba, okay, that's going to help these bones to become a little bit more what? Dense. So you can ward off the effects of osteo what? Porosis. Okay, so it talks about, it gives the example, bone remodeling comes about through what? The collaborative action of your osteoblasts and your what? Which one are your bone forming cells? Bone dissolving? Osteoclast. If a bone is little used, your osteoclast removes the matrix and get rid of unnecessary mass. If a bone is heavily used or stressed, or a stress is consistently applied to a particular region of a bone, your osteoblasts deposit new osseous tissue and thicken what? The bone. The comparatively small bones of an infant or toddler develop a variety of surface bumps, ridges, and spines described in Chapter 8 as the child begins to what? Walk. The greater trochanter of the femur, for example, is a massive outgrowth of bone stimulated by the pull of tendons from several powerful hip muscles employed in what? Walking. Remember that. Wolff's Law. I always put it on my exams. But that's important. So you guys can take a break, like a 10-minute break. I need to. Okay, I need to hear the laps. Robin, Brittany, Tori, Laverna, Jeremy, Bianca, Melissa, Brielle, Megan, Jonathan, Shaquita, and Maya Hoyle Brown, Mary, Joey, Ashley, Danielle. Okay. cold in here. Oh my God. Lord, we need to move to another room. I didn't realize how cold it was. Okay. Okay, now we're about to get into physiology. Uh-oh, Anatomy 202. Physiology of osseous what? Tissue. Over here we're going to look at calcium homeostasis and what can happen in your body if there is like an imbalance or not enough calcium there. Okay. A mature bone remains a metabolically active what? Organ. I think I told you when we started this chapter that bone, of course, is a living organ. We just saw during endochondral ossification how it's what? Highly vascular, which means it has what? Blood vessels. It needs nutrients. It's remodeled what? Throughout life. Okay. Disturbance, however, okay, of calcium homeostasis in your skeleton disrupts the function of what? The other organ systems, like your urinary system, your nervous system, your muscular system, your digestive system. It can disrupt the function there as well. So there are two terms you need to be familiar. We're going to look at the hormone calcitriol, calcitonin, and PTH, which is your parathyroid hormone, which is highly important or plays a significant role in maintaining calcium homeostasis. First, you need to understand the mineral deposition or mineralization. Hydroxyapatite crystals, of course, have to form, and once a solubility complex or product has been reached, of course, more calcium and phosphate, of course, is going to be deposited in your bone. Okay? Crystallization process in which calcium, phosphate, and other ions are taken from your blood plasma and deposited where? In your bone tissue. Now, when that happens, that's what's going to make the matrix of your bone very, very tough, very dense, very strong. Your osteoblasts are going to put down the collagen fibers. We know the effects that collagen fibers have on bones. It makes them really, really what? Strong, right? And, of course, the minerals, encrusted with minerals, which is your hydroxyapatite, of course. But once, in order for that solubility complex or product to form, like I said, the hydroxyapatite is going to make the bone hard. However, it needs a certain amount or concentration of the calcium in what? Your phosphate. Okay? So it just talks about that. And it talks about ectopic ossification, just like you can have an ectopic pregnancy, where the fetus will implant itself, like maybe in your fallopian tubes or somewhere outside of the uterus. The same thing here that can occur with bone ectopic ossification. Your bone can actually deposit in other certain structures or certain organs of the body, like arteriosclerosis or atherosclerosis. It's going to become what? Very, very hard wherever it deposits itself, because that particular organ or structure is going to become what? Calcified. Okay? So definitely read about solubility product, the critical value of it, and the role it plays in mineral deposition, and of course, as well as what? Resorption. I just talked about this. Bullet number 1 is important. And that last one, seed crystals attract more calcium and phosphate. Topic ossification. Okay, mineral resorption, the process of dissolving bone and releasing minerals where? Into the blood. Your osteoclast, guys, plays a role in mineral resorption, as you can see. As I told you earlier, your osteoclasts, they're really not our friends, because they have these hydrogen pumps. Okay, they secrete hydrogen. Okay, between the osteoclast. The hydrogen, of course, is going to become hydrochloric acid, which is very, very what? Acidic. They're also going to release an enzyme called phosphatase over here. Okay, hydrochloric acid, as you can see, has a very, very low what? pH. So what's going to happen is it starts dissolving the bone, and the minerals are going to be stripped out of the bone. Okay, I think I told you guys to take a chicken bone, and if you soak it in vinegar over like almost 2 weeks period, that bone is going to be so soft you can be able to twist it, okay, in half. It's not going to be hard anymore because it has become what? Demineralized. Acid phosphatase, on the other hand, is an enzyme that's going to actually start stripping away at the what? The collagen, which actually gives the bone what? Its strength, the tensile strength, remember? So if you've got these two things that are being released, then quite naturally, your bones are not going to be very, very what? very strong. No minerals, you know, the collagen is being removed. I told you before, this is an example, braces on your teeth, which is a part of bone remodeling. You have a high pressure zone and you have a low pressure zone. So the appliance, the actual braces themselves, puts a lot of strength on that periodontal ligament, okay? So when it puts that strength on the periodontal ligament, those teeth starts to repositioning or shifting, okay? So you have the high pressure zone. Tooth moves because what? Your osteoclast dissolves the bone ahead of the tooth. So your osteoclast right here starts dissolving bone, allows the tooth to what? To shift, and then your osteoblasts are going to come in, and it's going to what? Lay down the framework for what? The new bone, once the tooth is what? Moved or shifted, okay? Like I said, remember I told you you're going to see these two words a lot. We haven't really talked about your osteocytes over here, although they play a role in bone remodeling as well. We haven't talked about your osteoprogenitor cells, which are your what? Your stem cells, but I guess we really don't need to talk about that. So your osteoblasts deposit bone more slowly in the low pressure zone where? Behind. So you've got one in front breaking the bone down so your teeth can move. You've got one coming behind it that's going to what? Lay down what? More what? Bone. Okay? All right, here we go. You need to know this. Okay. Calcium homeostasis. Now, your diet, there has to be a balance of calcium in your diet. When you urinate and in your feces, okay? Because that's when we can lose a lot of calcium, which is not good. Okay, calcium homeostasis, of course, is on page 221. Okay. So yeah, the first paragraph is important. We're going to talk about muscle contraction, the role calcium plays to allow our muscles to contract. In Anatomy 202, you're going to talk about the role of calcium among the neurons, blood clotting, and things of that sort. But anyway, as I told you guys earlier, 99% of your skeleton, of course, is what? Calcium, which is 1,100 grams actually. So in a normal day, we can lose up to 1,100, that entire 1,100 grams of calcium, okay? That's why it's important. If you do, that's why a lot of people are on calcium supplements, but if you take calcium, you need to take vitamin D so you won't get constipated. But the concentration in our blood for calcium, there has to be a certain level, should be between 9.2 to 10.4 milligrams per deciliter. If it drops below that, you become hypocalcemic. Okay, if it goes above that, you become what? Hypercalcemic. Either or, both of them can be fatal. Both of them can lead to what? To death. Okay? 45%, as calcium can diffuse across your capillary walls and affect other tissues, rest in reserve bound to what? Plasma what? Protein. So we're about to look at hypo and hyper what? Yeah. Here's hypo. This one is the most common type right here. Hypercalcemia, of course, is rare. As you can see, this one is more common in pregnant women. I think that's why women take one of those vitamins that pregnant women take. Yeah, prenatal vitamins. Prenatal vitamins, doesn't it have calcium, a lot of vitamins and minerals and things? Yeah. Okay, because pregnant lactating women, of course, the developing fetus is growing, or the embryo, of course, is going to take up a lot of that calcium, and they have to take a supplement. If you have any type of thyroid tumor, underactive parathyroid glands, not to mention diarrhea. Lord, 1,100, if you got diarrhea going on, That's why your doctor say, you need to go and drink some Gatorade or something, because it has those minerals in it, which are called electrolytes. So vitamin D deficiency, like I said, if you have a deficiency of it, you're going to be what? Calcemic. And it says right here, accidental removal of your parathyroid gland during thyroid surgery, because this gland here, you have the right here in your neck, and it sits right so closely to your thyroid gland, I guess they can accidentally remove it. But typically, if that gland is removed, people have their parathyroid glands removed. They have to take PTH injections, because the parathyroid gland in us is what keeps our calcium level between that 9.2 and 10.4 milligrams per deciliter, because we secrete parathyroid hormone. Quite naturally, if you have a parathyroid gland, it's going to secrete the parathyroid hormone. So, like I said, this one is more common. Here are those 3 hormones I mentioned to you guys earlier. This one plays a very, very pivotal role in people that are hypocalcemic. This one, calcitonin, which is secreted by your C cells in your thyroid gland. If you are hypercalcemic, the parathyroid hormone kind of works hand in hand with calcitriol. As I told you before, this one right here is going to be is released in us if we have our parathyroid glands. Of course, it's going to keep that balance going on there. So there has to be a balance between, as I told you before, your diet, your urine, and the feces, okay, and exchanges between your osseous tissue. Remember, you have 1,100 grams in your bones, right? Okay. Now, on page, it just kind of goes into make sure you read clinical application, osseous tissue, and pH balance. That's important. I think as nursing, if you're going into nursing, you're going to probably need to know that. I know in Biology 103, I typically would talk about the pH scale and the range that your blood should actually be in. And if it drops too low, you're going to need 2 buffers, carbonic acid and bicarbonate. I think it talks about carbonate in that little box, so definitely read about that. Acidosis and alkalosis. Acidosis, which simply means your blood is too acidic. Alkalosis simply means that the pH of your blood is a little bit too high. Okay? So this is how calcitriol is actually made, guys. If you look, they're showing you the ring structure of calcitriol, and as you can see, it's considered a vitamin, okay? So UV light. Remember in chapter 5 when we talked about the integumentary system, and I was telling you guys to make vitamin D, you just need to spend a small amount of time in the sun. So if you are exposed to ultraviolet light or the rays from the sun, it's going to make contact with the epidermis first, right? Or the top layer of your skin. Okay, that particular, and then it's going to transform itself into vitamin D3, which is cholecalciferol, which of course is going to be made by your liver, and then of course is going to be converted from cholecalciferol to calcidiol, which of course is in your kidneys, and then it becomes calcitriol. And of course, as you can see here, you got bone resorption, reduced excretion of the calcium. So when you urinate, you don't want to, some of that calcium is going to be reabsorbed, and you're not going to lose a lot of it. That's why it says reduced excretion, okay? And absorption of your calcium and phosphate. Your stomach, your small intestines, of course, is going to absorb some of it as well, so you won't lose too much of it. So that's very important. Yeah. So this on page 222, actually. And I just talked about it. Calcitriol is a form of vitamin D produced by a sequential action of the skin, the liver, and what? The kidneys. It's a vitamin. So we expect, we get it in our what? Milk. There are a lot of products or foods that we consume that have what? Vitamin D in it. So those of us that don't spend a lot of time in the sun, we should be consuming foods that are high in what? Your vitamin D. Okay? However, if not, you will get osteomalacia, okay, which is the adult form of rickets. Okay, calcitriol behaves as a hormone that raises your blood calcium what? Concentration. So over here you are what? Hypo what? Calcemic. Now, if you're hypocalcemic, your book mentions tetany. I think it's at 4 milligrams per deciliter. Let's look at that. Yeah. Page 221. 221. Remember, this one is the most common type. All right. Hypo. Oh. Page, at the bottom of page 221, what does it say above clinical application? The calcium deficiency is called what? It causes what? Yeah, it excites the nervous system. So that's how you know the nervous system. Okay, how is it going to excite the nervous system? Those neurons right here, they're going to constantly contract. Okay, because you're going to talk about the sodium-potassium pump. Okay, once those sodium gates are open, the sodium goes in, potassium goes out. Calcium, of course, if those gates doesn't close, calcium, which we're going to talk about in another chapter, has to bind to this structure in your muscles called troponin. Once calcium binds to it, that's when your muscles contract. So over here, like I said, it's going to excite the nervous system, which means your muscles are going to be in a constant state of what? Contraction, which is called tetany. And it mentions it. Tetany is what? The inability of your muscles to what? To relax. If your larynx locks up, contracts too much or becomes too constricted, you're going to suffocate. Okay, with hypo what? Calcemic. Tetany begins to occur as the plasma calcium concentration falls to what? 6 milligrams per deciliter. One sign of it is strong spasmodic flexion, like this. You're stuck in what? Spasmodic flexion of what? The wrist and your what? Yep. Yeah, like that. It's contracted. Okay? I thought I had a picture of it, but it doesn't. Okay. An extension of the other finger is called the Troisier sign, often induced by the inflation of a blood pressure cuff, putting pressure on the brachial nerve. At 4 milligrams, muscles of the larynx contract so tightly, a condition called what? Laryngeal spasm, which can shut off airflow and cause what? Suffocation. Hyper is the opposite. Your nervous system becomes what? Depressed. It's not what? Excitable. But however, if you go into hypercalcemic, it can lead to cardiac what? Arrest. Okay? But that one is rare. 12 milligrams per deciliter and higher hypercalcemia causes depression of your nervous system, emotional disturbances, muscle weakness, sluggish reflexes, and sometimes what? Cardiac arrest. Typically, there's a 50% reduction in calcium, which causes what? The cardiac arrest. But as you can see, either or does not matter, whether it's hypo or what? Hyper, they're both what? Pretty fatal. That's why there has to be what? A balance. Okay? Calcitriol. Now, if you don't have enough calcium in your bones, as we know. Children, they have what? The really, really soft, weak, and what? Pliable bones. They have what? Rickets. In us, if we don't have enough, we have the adult form of rickets, guys, is osteomalacia, okay, without adequate what? Vitamin D. So vitamin D, calcium, all of that plays a role. That's why, like I said, when you take a calcium supplement, chances are your doctor's going to say, well, you need to take vitamin D along with it, because both of those together is going to actually strengthen the bones. So if you follow the arrows, this is physiology, this is your homeostasis right here, okay? So these three right here are responsible. This vitamin plus these two hormones is responsible for maintaining the amount of calcium that we need in our blood, which is between what, 9.2 to 10 milligrams per what, deciliter. Now if you look at calcitriol, okay, this person over here is hyper what? Calcemic, okay? So calcitriol has to put more calcium where? In the bloodstream, okay? So that's why you see the arrow pointing where? Into the blood. But as I told you before, your feces, this is the amount that you can lose, 350. When you urinate, you can lose 650, which comes out to be what? That 1,100 milligrams, right? What is 350 and 650? 1,000? Yeah. So you can lose 1,000 milligrams per what? Per day. So right here, you're going to absorb it from where? Your digestive system, and dump it where? Here, because you got to bring it back up, okay? If you go down here with your kidneys, the same thing. Reabsorption simply means some of it is going to be what? You're not going to lose all of it, because it's going to be dumped where? Back into your what? Your blood, and bring it back up. So calcitriol right here on your kidneys have a weak effect, but over here your parathyroid hormone has a more stronger effect than calcitriol. You follow it from down here. Your osteoclasts, what do? The role of your osteoclasts do what? What are osteoclasts? What? Right, they're bone dissolving cells, right? And you see what they're going to do. I told you they're going to strip the minerals out of the bone, right? What mineral? Calcium. They're taking calcium where? Out, dumping it where? Here. Calcitriol and what? Your PTH does that. So if you go back, okay, increases calcium absorption by your small intestines. What are we trying to do? We're trying to raise it, right? Increases calcium resorption from where? The skeleton, your osteoclast, right? Promotes kidney reabsorption of calcium ions, so less is lost where? In your urine. This is not functioning properly. Know the two diseases that you can get, because you know I'm going to put it on your exam. Rickets in children, right? Osteomalacia in whom? Us, adults. Exactly. Make sure you read, guys, calcium homeostasis on page 221, 222, and what? 223. Right. So they have rickets and osteomalacia on page 220 what? 3. Okay. So as I told you, the parathyroid hormone, guys, so what it does, like I say, it works in conjunction with your calcitriol. It actually enhances the effects to make calcitriol to function a little bit more, to function better. Now let's look at calcitonin. Over here, your osteoclasts are going to be inhibited. When we looked at calcitriol and that person was hypocalcemic, your osteoclast was what? Kind of stimulated or activated, right? Because what were they doing? What? They were what? Taking the calcium out of the bone, right? Why aren't y'all responding to my questions? Can I give y'all a quiz? Well, y'all are having a quiz Monday. Do not get caught up in Classic Weekend. You know, Classic has been going on since the beginning of time. Excuse me? Did somebody say something about me? Probably don't want to keep up with it, do I? But seems like some of you have been studying for your bone exam. Anyway, that's what you do. That's how you do it. When you want to have fun for the weekend, you study the weekend before. Right. Right. Somebody explain this one. You want me to go back to that picture? Now, who can explain calcitonin? It's in your textbook. If you can't see up here, you can. It's nice, lovely picture on page 223. What's going on with the osteoblast? Deposition by osteoblast. So what are the osteoblasts doing with calcitonin? Secreting what? Well, the calcitonin is what? Secreted by your what? Your C cells, right? Which is in a part of your what? Your thyroid gland. But what role is why do you have the arrow going from the blood to the humerus? You have osteoblast. I mean, why? What did you say, Amanda? Right, and you're taking it out, right? And where are you putting it? In the bone, exactly. Deposition by what? So you want to go into cardiac arrest, right? Is that the only place you see the osteoblast? Oh, you see it coming from your blood going to the kidneys. What is it doing? So it's putting the calcium where? Back into what? The kidneys, right? Okay. So on one side, this side of the coin, somebody is hyper what? Calcemic, which means they're what? The calcium is above what? 10.4 milligrams per what? Deciliter. So why is it that, Brittany, if you look at number 1, it says within 15 minutes, this is under calcitonin on page 223, within 15 minutes after it is secreted, calcitonin reduces your osteoclast activity by as much as 70%. Why? That's a huge amount. It inhibits it. Why? Filter what out? I mean, water, urine. Okay, so what if the osteoclasts were stimulated over here? Right here. What if I had, like, versus calcitonin osteoclast inhibited? What if they were stimulated? Then what would happen? It would not if they were stimulated. Right, exactly. Because what do osteoclasts do? They're bone dissolving cells, right? And they what? Take the minerals where? Out, right? So if they were what? Stimulated or activated, that's when you'll go into cardiac arrest. That's why they're what? Inhibited. They're trying to shut it down. You know? Like, okay, no, stop. Okay? We need to keep the calcium right where it belongs because we've already got enough calcium over here. You got it? So it's what? It's trying to prevent something from happening. But your osteoblasts are stimulated over here. I wonder why. Within an hour, calcitonin increases the number and activity of your osteoblasts, which deposit calcium where? Deposited where? In the bone. Too much calcium where? In the blood. Okay? So calcitonin, of course, really doesn't have any negative implications on us. However, it is important for kids, okay, for them to have an ample enough, or it's okay if their calcium level is a little bit high but not too high, because their bones are still what? Developing anyway, you know? What time do y'all get out of here? 1 o'clock? Reduces bone loss in women. So the PTH, which of course, like I said, is secreted by our parathyroid gland when you're hypocalcemic, so it kind of plays a role with the calcitriol. Of course, it secretes what you call rank L, and it raises your calcium blood level by 4 mechanisms. However, it talks about here, like if you have osteoporosis, of course, you can kind of ward it off a little bit if you take injections of the PTH, the parathyroid hormone. Sporadic injections or secretion of low levels of what PTH causes bone deposition and can increase your bone mass. It can actually make your bones really, really strong. Okay. This is homeostasis again. And they're really just showing you how, everything that I just mentioned to you guys. And here's phosphate, which is the second most abundant mineral in the bone, 500 to 800 grams. I'm trying to see how much of this stuff. Some of this I'm going to skip. Other factors affecting bone. What are some other factors affecting bone? What are some other factors affecting bone? Hormones. What hormones does your book talk about? Y'all don't talk very much in here, right? Estrogen, testosterone. Is that all it mentions? Hmm? Um, Surges of growth hormone, estrogen, and testosterone occur and promote what? Ossification, which is what? Bone formations. These hormones stimulate what? Multiplication of your osteogenic cells, which are your what? Your stem cells, okay, which converts into what? Osteoblasts, which of course leads to what? Bone formation. Okay, your chondrocytes will multiply. Hypertrophy is going to take place, which I mentioned to you guys earlier. Why do girls grow faster than boys? You know, in the second grade, all the girls are taller than the boys. Estrogen. Estrogen has a stronger effect, in which means that girls take off and they grow at a faster rate and they reach full height before what? Boys. Okay? Why is it supposedly that the boys are taller than girls? Exactly. Testosterone, although it kicks in later, at a later date, at a later time, the effects of it is going to be longer in boys, and they tend to what? Grow taller than what? The females. But I often question that because there are a lot. What time is it? Like she's went out on a. Don't take the steroids, folks, guys. Don't put your kids on steroids, which explains why they're short. Abnormally short adult stature. Okay, read about bone fractures. We're going to stop here. I'm about to go to the gym, and y'all about to have a mock bone exam. I'm excited about that. Hope you